Hey everybody, it is Luke, and thanks again for joining us at the Tailgate. As always, I am joined by Dennis and Michael.
Hello, everyone.
And today we have a very special guest. With us tonight is Darren from Darren Talks Ball. Darren, how you doing, my friend?
What's up? I was going to do a really awkward wave that I could like barely see myself in the camera down in the corner, and I'm still doing the awkward wave, even though I said, I don't know. Hi, what's up, everybody?
As long as you want to do the wave, we're good with it. So we can edit it all out.
I am a Midwestern white dude talking college football, so I may as well do the on-brand awkward wave. Right.
That works.
That works, and you're a dad too, so you've always got the awkward dad stuff.
It fits. I can't guarantee there will be no dad jokes in this either.
That's also perfectly fine.
That's fine. I love them.
They just happen.
It happens. The best of us. Good dad jokes are well appreciated.
Well, I don't know about them being good. That's part of it. That's part of the point.
True. Dad jokes aren't good. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're right.
They're great.
Well, first, the question we kind of try and ask everybody is, tell us about your Michigan story. What brought you to be a Michigan fan?
Oh man. Right to like the nitty gritty, huh?
Yeah, like where did it come from?
We only got a few minutes, so like 20 minutes. So we have to get to everything.
Yeah. So mine's a little interesting actually. I didn't really grow up in a family that was like big on football or anything. My dad was actually a huge car guy, and to this day I still watch like NASCAR and Formula One. Those are really the only other sports I watch. But
okay,
just something about it. When I was like 6-7 years old, I saw. Other Michigan fans are gonna know what I'm talking about here, but outside other college football fans are really, what the hell is that? There was a show that used to come on like Sunday afternoons. It was like Inside Michigan Football or something like that. It had Jim Brandstatter on, who was like this legendary Michigan broadcaster. And back in the late 90s, when Michigan was like winning the 97 national championship and they had Charles Woodson and all that, I was like 7-8 years old. And I saw that show one random Sunday, and it was like Jim Brandstatter sitting there with Lloyd Carr. They're talking about all these great players and like going over the replays and all that stuff. It was like like I said, Sunday afternoon, not in football season, just like out of season. I was just like enamored with it for some reason. And ever since I've been like, again, enamored with Michigan football. I do have to admit, before we really get into it, I am a Walmart Wolverine. I did not graduate from the university. I know it's a big thing out there to some people, but it's just been growing up in Michigan, and especially at the time, like the time I grew up in, late 90s, early 2000s, before 2008 and the whole like Michigan football collapse, of course, it happened. That was like the only good sports team we had, especially when it came to football. Like the Lions have always been garbage. Michigan State back then in my time coming up was like in the John L. Smith era, just like terrible.
Yep.
So it was like the one football team I latched onto. And then going through like my early adulthood and stuff like that, I kind of like had a crazy, like my 20s are pretty crazy. I played in some bands, toured around the country, worked around the country and stuff like that. So kind of got out of touch with it for a while. But then a few years ago, I moved back into Michigan, settled down, got married, had a kid, and then was like, now that I'm more settled down, I'm going to watch some more. I'm going to watch college football again. And just this past season started the channel and really dove back into it. So yeah. That's pretty much my Michigan football journey right there.
Yeah, we were actually like texting today, talking about the whole like, did you have to graduate to be a fan?
To be a fan.
And I was like, I actually thought about going like taking like an online class at Ohio State just to be like, hey, I'm in alone. And I took an online class.
Sign up.
That's all you need to do. All you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're surrounded by like-minded individuals here. We're none of us graduated from our from the schools we like.
And Dennis doesn't even like a school.
Dennis came closest to he actually attended the school he likes. Right. So
here we go.
So it's at least in the conference that used to exist that he likes.
Right.
He's a big Pac-12 fan.
All right.
So insult what you guys can, huh?
Man, I missed the Pac-12 after dark. That's gonna suck this next season, by the way.
I agree 100%.
You mean you don't want to just watch Oregon State and Washington State?
The Pac-2?
The Pac-2. Yeah. Have them play it.
I mean, they lost their best player too.
I'm not sure why. They did. I was really excited about that for like 2 weeks. I was like, what are they gonna do? What's going on out there? And kind of secretly hoping they just form a 2-team conference, because there is some like court case or something about that.
Yeah,
where like they were like, no, they can be a conference if they want to be.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh yeah.
What school is trying to have like the biggest conversation? It's like you're not even there anymore. You know, like USC was one of them was like just trying to be like, no, like we still have opinions. It's like, yeah, you already left the conference.
Yeah, you're going
here. You're big kid.
Yeah,
Get out.
Well, all those schools in California are kind of weird too, aren't they? Because they're all under like the University of California umbrella or whatever. So like technically, USC and Cal and UCLA are all kind of related in some way. I'm not a lawyer or anything. I just hear it through.
Yeah, Dennis would be the one that has
a podcast I listen to.
My oldest brother went to Cal, and he would always say that UCLA is the younger brother of Cal.
Very nice.
And then USC is the University of Spoiled Children.
Yep.
Be a private school. Yeah, I mean, they're located in the middle of Los Angeles and
okay.
like South Central side of things. And I'm like, you just see a random school just place it around like neighborhoods that are, not the best.
Yeah. I've always heard it referred to as University of South Central.
Yeah.
And I do remember, I am old enough to remember like Snoop Dogg lurking their sidelines and stuff like that back in the Pete Carroll days.
Oh yeah.
Reggie Bush, by the way, I feel like we should mention Reggie Bush getting his Heisman back was pretty cool.
Sure.
In my opinion. I don't know about you guys, but
they were literally just talking about that before you got on. For like 20 minutes.
Nice.
Yep.
Going back and forth about things they didn't disagree on.
Yeah, we're talking in circles about like agreeing and just talking different. Like we're just stating this in a different way, but let's
We
yell.
both think he's a great player.
Yeah, let's yell at each other for a while.
What's both the beautiful and ugly thing about college football, right? Is you can find all these things to disagree on and fight over, and then also all these things to like connect over, right? It's really cool.
Exactly.
That's right.
Well, and I'm gonna give you one to think on. Maybe as we go before Dennis kind of gets into some coaching. This past weekend, I've always tried to figure out how to explain to people why I think the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry is like the best rivalry in sports. Because people are always going to say like the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Celtics and the Lakers, all this. And I agree, those are great rivalries. I came up with my reasoning that like I can articulate this past weekend. And so I want to know what yours is and how you articulate it. Mine was, I was going through Twitter or X, whatever it's called, and I'm seeing like Michigan fans post like, oh, we've had the most players drafted since 2017, and cutting off, like in Ohio State did this all, last year. Oh, you're cherry picking, you're cutting everything off. And I'm like, the amount of pettiness that there is between Michigan and Ohio State just proves how big this rivalry is, because we don't want you guys to have a step on anything.
It's over everything.
Over everything.
The amount of stuff Ohio State and Michigan fans will find to argue over will never cease to amaze me.
Yeah.
Like it's just, and I another thing on like kind of my background stuff, I had to live in Ohio for a few years, kind of like in the middle of the like Rich Rod years, and it was rough.
Yeah, that's a bad time to be there.
I had no ammo, and it was just like, and it's funny now because like Ohio State, of course, lost like 3 in a row, and like, you see it on Twitter too, I'm sure, like kind of finding things like, oh, well, we have more quarterbacks that have been drafted. This and that. I remember living in Ohio in like the down years of Michigan football and doing the same thing, like trying to cling to things to brag about when like you don't really have anything to brag about in terms of like the game itself over the past couple of years, but that's the links they'll go to. That's the links either side will go to whenever they're in down years. And it's crazy. It takes over people's lives.
It does.
That rivalry. So yeah.
Very interesting. So, okay. Well,
I mean, I guess kind of going off there, how you're saying basically Ohio State has not won in the past couple of years. And I guess with the coaching staff changes, like, and especially some key players, J.J. McCarthy, Corum, Stallion, Ohio State's dad, Harbaugh leaving. Do you think
I heard Stallion?
Yeah. Do you think Sean Moore is gonna be able to step up and be the next stepdad to Ohio State? Because I guess it's kind of what.
Yes. Ann Arbor is really gonna miss those vacuum repair shops.
Right.
They are.
I really like the hire of Sharon.
Oh,
I really did. I thought, and this, I think, and this is kind of getting like into like I'm a humanities major, by the way, so I always think from like a 30,000 foot.
Sure.
But I think if we had more of an appreciation of kind of like the old school ground and pound, like running game, old school style of offenses that Sharon Moore likes to run, and of course Jim Harbaugh liked to run and all that. Sherrone Moore would have gotten a lot more appreciation, in my opinion, as an offensive coordinator.
Sure.
I think especially as evidenced in what he did in the Penn State game last season, the moves that he made in that game to just nearly survive Chop Robinson coming for JJ's head every play. What he had to do in the Ohio State game and having the guts to go for it on 4th down several times in that game to get them through. The calls that he made in the Alabama game and the style of offense that they schemed up particularly for that game, I think we don't give him enough credit because it's not like some Lincoln Riley, Josh Heupel throwing the ball all over the yard kind of, or even like Chip Kelly read option kind of modern day offense, because they're running a lot of these like duo plays and gap scheme plays. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but the way that he dials things up and the way he schemes things up is genius, first of all. So I really like his offensive philosophy. Of course, if you guys know anything about Sherrone Moore, he's an old Oklahoma guy.
Yep.
And he played guard, I believe it was.
Yeah, he was
blocking from Sam Bradford back in the day, which makes me feel like I feel like Sam Bradford was like yesterday. But he's I'm blanking on the name, but the coach that he played under, Oklahoma, he's that kind of guy, like ground and pound. So it's really, and the key word this whole offseason for Michigan football has been continuity, and you kind of keeping you've watched a lot of coaches go out the door, but you're keeping that same general philosophy and culture, which I think gives a lot of Michigan fans hope for the future. And Sherrone Moore, from what I've seen so far, has done a really good job holding the team together. Of course, some players have left in the portal. Things have gone on. Some, I'm sure we'll get to in a minute, some assistant coaches maybe should have called some Ubers and things like that. But by and large, he's done a great job so far. We're only through the spring game, but so who knows? But so far, I think he's done about as good as you could expect.
I would agree with that. I feel like people are kind of overlooking the fact that Sherrone Moore being there for quite a while at Michigan, I feel like it was more or less being groomed to be able to take over for Harbaugh. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, he came in there as the offensive line coach, and before he coached at Michigan, I believe he was at Central Michigan.
Yeah.
So came up as like a MAC guy and just had to prove himself. And, you know, of course, fits the mold of it's a term I don't like to use very often because I feel like it's very cliche, but fits the mold of the Michigan man. This hardworking guy who's worked his way up through the ranks and caught the eye of Jim Harbaugh, and now he's the next head coach at Michigan. So,
yeah, and pretty much most of their coaching hires, and you'll know this because I'm, obviously don't pay as much attention, but most of the guys, like you said, keeping that continuity. A lot of the guys that left, just kind of like they replaced them with like the offensive coordinator got replaced by, what was it, the
Kirk Campbell, the
quarterbacks coach, right? And like defensive coordinator, they have Wink Martindale coming in. The strength coach that I've never seen so much love for a strength and conditioning coach, and it just made me very curious as to why. But like even his like protege just kind of stepped up. So that continuity, it seems like everybody they got had some kind of tie already to either the coach, the style, or something. Is that pretty accurate to say?
Yeah, very much so. Like you mentioned, Wink Martindale coming in, he was the mentor to Jesse Minter. And
say that 5 times fast.
What's the name of the guy that just left? Jesse Minter's the guy that just left. Mike McDonald. There we go. And he was the guy that mentored them, and he even coached under Jim Harbaugh's dad back in the day. So that goes to show how long coaching. Right. Of course, when he was at the Ravens, I believe I just looked it up the other day. For the entirety that he was the defensive coordinator at the Ravens in the NFL, they were a top 3 overall defense in the NFL. And guy knows what he's doing. He's been around for a long time. And of course, again, keeping that continuity of that kind of Ravens style defense, I think will go a long ways. And of course, that's where all the talent is for this team this next season too. They're returning a lot on the defensive side. And then of course, the strength coach, you mentioned Ben Herbert, Justin Tress comes in, fills his spot. And I've never seen it in my life before. There's so much love for a strength coach, but I think it's deserved. A lot of people fail to mention too just how important he was in recruiting, getting with recruits as they came in on visits and going over like, hey, if you come to this team, this is what I'm going to do for you. Or, hey, I see you've had this like lagging injury going on for a while. Here's how I would fix it. And like really connecting with recruits in that way. There are even some players on Michigan's roster currently and ones that just left for the draft. They're like, yeah, I had this thing going on when I came onto the field in college, and he fixed it, and that like made everything better for me. So when other strength coaches couldn't, Justin Tress comes up, guy that had worked under Herbert his entire career, and just keeping that continuity. I think, of course, time will only tell how all these hires will work, but I think just me, if I was in control over things, and obviously Michigan just having won the national championship with that scheme and those types of guys last season, makes the most sense to just level some people up and keep the scheme and the continuity going.
Sure.
So with all of that said, how right now you guys have an NCAA infraction looming because of some.
Which one?
We're not going to talk about the one that everybody wants to talk about. We're going to talk about the one that actually has already been basically concluded. They're just going to pass judgment here later because that's what the NCAA does. They go, well, we have an announcement. We've got an infraction, and now we're going to judge on it later. The one about in 2020, just the improper contact and stuff like that for recruits and stuff like that for the COVID years. Do you think that any of those infractions that may get handed down are really going to affect Michigan in the long run? You think it's going to be kind of like what Tennessee dealt with, where it's a little bit of some muddy water for a couple of years, and then they're just kind of in the clear?
Hey, boosters, we need some money.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's kind of the difference too. I think Tennessee has both the state legislature and the boosters who will come in and be like, you're not messing with our football program.
No, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
The culture around Michigan is interesting too, because of course it's a really reputable educational institution, more so than most colleges too. It's kind of like the Harvard or the Midwest or whatever. And that there's a whole, I want to say this as nice as possible so that people don't get it twisted, because people will. I'm sure there'll be people in the comments that get it twisted. Yeah. But there's a whole culture around the university outside of the football program that couldn't care less about football and just don't want the sacred name Michigan tarnished. So I don't think in terms of comparing it to Tennessee and how they handled it to Michigan, I don't think Michigan will handle any of the stuff similar to any other college, because Michigan is, and we saw it this past season with the self-imposed coaching suspensions and stuff, they will punish themselves sometimes, maybe even worse than the NCAA would, and they did in the past under previous ADs and stuff like that.
Well, technically,
that kind of 80s and 90s.
Technically speaking, Tennessee did too. For when I'm talking about the Pruitt stuff, yeah, Tennessee actually caused a lot of suspensions and stuff like that, and they actually kept themselves from being able to. I think it was 60 different scholarship players over 3 or 4 years, and that was before the NCAA stepped in and did anything. So so
I did not know that.
Yeah, this the most recent stuff with Tennessee, that's just more Tennessee wanting to shut down the NCAA that's overstepping.
And I think they are.
Yeah. So
for sure.
But yeah, I just wanted to correct the note there, because I think what you guys are dealing with now is very similar to what Tennessee dealt with Jeremy Pruitt, and that cost Tennessee $12 million and is a bunch of nastiness. So.
Yeah. It is very similar. I think it's really interesting too, because I think some of the stuff that's come out was kind of ticky-tack. A lot of people like to talk about the cheeseburger thing and even later cheeseburger gate. I'll be one to say it was much more than just a cheeseburger, but at the same time, part of it was just Jim Harbaugh bought a guy a cheeseburger. What is the harm here? To use kind of a legalese term. What does that really do in the end? And then also some of it was recruits doing push-ups on calls to show how they work out to the coaches, which was just an impromptu show us how you do a push-up, and then the NCAA was no working out over Zoom because this is some arbitrary rule we threw in post haste during COVID. Yeah, I liken a lot of it to, and this is kind of how the NCAA operates at large anyway, because let's be honest, any college football program that has had any success over the past 30, 40, however some odd years are pushing the limits on all this stuff, right?
Sure, of course.
And in the videos I've done about this, I've compared it a lot to speed limits. And I know it's kind of it's an analogy a lot of us use, but I think it's apt here. And Michigan got caught doing 5 or 10 over.
Sure.
Does everyone else speed down that highway?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do some people do it maybe not as often or not as much? Yeah. Do some people recklessly drive? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But you got caught at the end of the day. And you got to be the piper. As far as your question on how much it will affect them, I think only time will tell. I think the one thing I'm most worried about is the recruiting stuff, the limited scholarships that may come down.
Sure.
Because, and I don't know if you guys have any more questions on this. I don't want to give too much away here, but this next class in particular, I think might be one of the most important for Michigan in recent history, because the last couple haven't been that great. And if you have sanctions on top of that are going to hurt you, it's really important for Sherwin Moore and the staff to recruit right away.
Sure.
Because you don't have, after Will Johnson leaves, by the way, that's your last 5-star that you had. After Will Johnson and Donovan Edwards leave, excuse me, those are your 2 last 5-stars that you had on this roster. So recruiting is very important. We all know that. It might be even more important this season for Michigan. And then if they have scholarship limits, that's really going to hurt them, I think. But only time will tell, too.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, that's the reason I asked, was just more or less, it's like, I know that this is a very crucial time for Moore and his coaching staff to make sure they solidify kind of their place. And again, they're having to replace Harbaugh, which is not an easy task. We've said all year, when any big fan base is like looking at replacing their coach because they're just mad at, like we were talking about Ryan Day, like Ryan Day loses to Michigan again. Like, he's lost 1 game in a year, in a season. Why are you getting so upset? Like, who are you going to replace him with? It's the same with I agree. I think you guys replaced with probably the best person you could have replaced him with. In someone who clearly loves Michigan football too. And so it's just like, I was just curious just to see how many, how it would eventually affect you guys. But, we can get into the.
Well, and like you said, I mean, I think one of the other things that he did, I think the DUIs that you brought up, 2 coaches in the offseason get DUIs. I think Sharon Moore handled that. Handled that perfectly. I think as much as it was hard to get rid of those guys, especially Denard, with just who he is to the fan base and the players, I think it's what had to be done. So what are your thoughts about him getting rid of those 2 guys and just how he handled all of that?
No, I think it was the right move, and I think sometimes we get caught up, especially as fans, in just like the game on the field and the results. But at the end of the day, these are young men that you are mentoring, right? Like, with as much as things have changed with NIL and the transfer portal and this or that, college football, and especially the way that Michigan operates, is you bring these 18-year-old young men in, and you're really teaching them the game of football, but also teaching them a lot about life. And you don't want guys around that are getting into trouble like that around your program. You just don't, because at the end of the day, while I like to think sometimes that like my fandom is more important and the results on the field are more important, these are young kids' lives that are potentially getting affected by having to be around stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think it was the right move. I think it ultimately was.
Perfect. Now let's go here again from the young men. You guys had big draft. Didn't quite break the record. You're close.
Not quite.
Didn't quite get there.
But
But because of that, and because you had so many guys go in the draft and so many guys signed as undrafted free agents and leave because they were seniors, you got a lot of roles to fill. I mean, pretty much your entire offense is gone. Now, obviously, you've got a pretty good running back, top 2, top 5, maybe top 1. I don't know. Coming back, you got a few quarterbacks. I think the one that's the most interesting, and I'd kind of like you to start on, is obviously you lost Saab to Alabama, and then Moore, what was it, like a week later, 2 weeks later, tears his ACL, which hated for him. Like that's you never want to see that for a guy. But how big was that transfer to y'all after Moore went down?
it was huge. One thing that I will say is thank God Quentin Johnson came back because the depth, well, especially now, looking at the defensive backfield more broadly too, DJ Waller hit the transfer portal. I always miss one because there were so many, to be honest. There were guys that were like a little lower on the depth chart, but like some of the 2s and 3s left. And then when a guy like Rod Moore goes down, that really hurts. And Rod Moore right there with Mikey Sanders. So if you watch the tape from last season, was a guy who was very oftentimes calling things out pre-play, lining guys up, getting guys in the right spots. So especially in the like games in State and Oregon and Texas this year, I think you're gonna miss that. I think before the Saab transfer and before the Rod Moore injury, I would have said that Michigan's defensive backfield as a whole is right up there with Ohio State as far as being one of the best in the Big Ten. I think they're firmly in number 2 or number 3 territory in that regard now because Makari Page is still back there at safety. He's been around forever, very experienced, a very good safety who made some awesome plays in that national championship game that don't get talked about enough, by the way. And then Quentin Johnson, again, very experienced guy. some other guys that are up and coming that look to like fill that nickelback role, if not rotating at safety, like Zeke Berry. Hillman is another guy. Jair Hill is a guy I'm very excited about as cornerback 2, possibly. I personally think he should have been a 5-star. He was a 4-star coming out of high school, like a 96 or 97 rating, just to tick below 5-star status. But he's really great, long, athletic, and freaky fast. But it's just the depth isn't there this year like we had last year. Right. We were rotating guys. I mean, Keon Sapp barely played, I think, until about that Alabama game and the national championship game, and then he was out. So yeah.
And what about the offense? What are they doing? I watched some of the spring game. Orgy, I think once he got a little, he had a couple bad throws there at the beginning, but I felt like he got his feet underneath him. He started to play a little bit better. I can't remember the other two quarterbacks that I was seeing, but they seem to be pretty good.
Yeah, so they also have Davis Warren. It should be a note, Jack Tuttle didn't get to play in the spring game. He's a guy who's been around forever. I think he was originally Michael Penix's backup at Indiana, and Michael Penix first started at Indiana like way back in
1993.
So he's a super
I think it'll be his 7th season of college football, which is like longer tenured than most NFL guys get.
Yep. So he's like 42.
Yeah. And then, of course, Jaden Davis is a freshman that just came in, 5-star guy, 4 or 5-star guy, depending on what service you look at. I don't think he will have a shot at the job, and it sounds like they're looking to redshirt him. I think I especially had the benefit of having been to the spring game in person and not warm-ups and everything. I think the competition right now is really down to Davis Warren and Alex Orji. The old school, like wing tee loving football fanatic in me, the like Fritz Chrysler loving Michigan fan wants to see some old wing tee stuff out there with Alex Orji and running some like maybe even like Tom Osborne-esque triple option stuff. Is that tenable though in modern college football, especially when you are going to have to throw the ball inevitably sometimes? Probably not. Maybe you run a little bit of stuff. Of course, Alex Orji played in spot duty last season. But I was also really impressed by Davis Warren, and I thought even, of course, like I said, having been to the spring game in person, watching warm-ups, he looked really confident. I like I'm not a big quarterback analyst guy. I never played the position. Just from my novice eyes, looked like he had good footwork, has a great release. He's a guy with an interesting story, too. A lot of people see him and just think, oh, he was a former walk-on. He was actually well on his way to being a 4 or even 5-star recruit until he got diagnosed with leukemia back in high school. So he had to overcome leukemia, and then he was back in time for the COVID year. But then where he lived at the time, which I think was, he moved from LA to New Jersey, and I'm not sure where he was living at the time, but they didn't play any high school ball, hardly at all, in his senior season because of COVID. So he actually ended up becoming a walk-on, mostly because of that. But you see now the upside from the spring game. I think he was 6 of 9 for 130-something yards and a couple of touchdowns, a couple of good touchdown passes, too. The deep shot to Kendrick Bell especially was a really good pass. If you're a fan of the offense that Michigan has already been running with J.J. McCarthy, I think you like Davis Warren. He's got a little bit of mobility, can escape the pocket and still throw on the run. Keeps his eyes downfield when he's under pressure, which is a big thing, especially with this offensive line, which I think will be better than most people think, but maybe not as good as last year. We'll have to see. So, yeah, I think that's really what the competition is down to. And I think it's based a lot on exactly what kind of offense the coaches want to run. Because Alex Orji is like Jalen Milroe unpolished. So we're going to see what you have there. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned the line because you guys got what? You got 3 guys who were all pretty good coming in, like top 60, I believe, top 60 recruits. And then you got 2 transfers in. So you got some really good talent there on the offensive line. Just kind of that continuity that you had last year, you might not have this year. It might start off a little rough. So how are they looking in the spring?
It's hard to tell. A lot of the guys were banged up. I myself, I didn't see Giovanni El Hadi or Josh Preeb out there. Josh Preeb was the transfer that came in from Northwestern. I believe he was like 3rd team All Big Ten last year. Didn't see much of them. Did see a little bit of Greg Crippen, but he had a cast on one hand, so it's hard to really gauge exactly how well he can play when you're playing with something like that as center, snapping the ball. So Yeah, it was really, and with the way that Michigan does their spring game too, it's especially hard to tell because I don't know if you guys know, but they do a draft. So like the offensive line completely gets like split between the two different teams. So you don't actually see the first unit offensive line out there all together anyway. And then we had some guys banged up. I will say this though, speaking of the incoming freshman, Blake Frazier is a dude. They've already put him in number 77, which is Trevor Keegan's number.
Oh, wow.
And he came out on the field for warmups, and I was like, "Oh, Keegan!" And I was like, "Wait, shit, Keegan's gone. Who is this dude?
That's not the right guy.
That dude looks like he's already like a sophomore or junior.
Oh, wow.
He's big,
Passive.
and like you mentioned, the incoming freshmen. I don't know if any of them will start really, but one thing that people, I think, overlook when they knock Michigan's recruiting class, which was only ranked like 16th in the country in 2024, they had the second best offensive line recruiting class in the country, though. So a lot of those guys will be playing, maybe not this year, but very soon. There's a lot of talent there. I think they just got to figure out exactly where the pieces fit and how they fit. And I have confidence. Again, your head coach is a former offensive line guy.
Right.
So it's kind of similar with Ohio State with Ryan Day and all those guys. Like, you trust Ryan Day with quarterbacks. I trust Sharon more with offensive line stuff. I think he's got it. I think he's got it down.
Yeah, hopefully we can start trusting him a little bit more with those quarterbacks.
Maybe just a little bit.
A little bit. All right, so next year you've got a pretty tough schedule, right? I mean, you're going to play Texas.
You could say that, yeah.
You're going to play Texas. You're going to play USC, which, you know, who knows what USC is going to be. Oregon, Ohio State in there. Obviously, the Michigan State rivalry has been a little less of a rivalry in the recent years. But what are your thoughts on the schedule? You get to the end of the year, where are you guys going to be sitting?
Yeah, this is where I like to say, like, I like to think of myself as a fan who is honest with themselves.
Sure.
I don't see another undefeated season on the schedule, especially with everything we've gone over, everything Michigan has to replace. I think you're looking at 9-3, 10-2 territory. I think the Texas game early in the season especially will be a big test. Fortunately, that's an out-of-conference game, so if you can string together maybe a win versus Oregon or a win versus Ohio State, vice versa, I honestly don't think you're winning both of those games.
True.
Maybe even with the loss to Texas, you could find a way to sneak into the Big Ten championship game at the end of the season if you do beat one of those teams. Yeah. Outside of that, I don't think there are really too many teams, though, that will be a big test for Michigan. You do, I believe, I forgot to look this up before coming on with you guys, but I believe you have a West Coast trip out to Washington.
You do.
But outside of that, a lot of the bigger games are at home. USC, I think the thing with USC is we've seen it with Michigan playing Ohio State these past few years, especially when they're still running the full-blown Ryan Day offense. Michigan's just got the antidote to that kind of stuff. Like, they're built to stop teams like that, teams that like to throw the ball all over the place and rely on their quarterbacks heavily and play that kind of spread style. We saw it in the national championship game against Michael Penix. They made Michael Penix look like an FCS quarterback for 3 quarters. Like,
he did.
I'm not too worried about USC. Obviously, not too worried about Washington with a first-year head coach and Will Rogers playing quarterback. Good quarterback, but I think we can all agree is not Michael Penix.
Right.
I think those 3 games that you pointed out are really where the meat of the schedule is. But I think the good news for Michigan fans is 12-team playoff. You go 9-3. And your only 3 losses are against teams that are probably all in the top 5.
Right.
You're probably sneaking into the latter rungs of the playoff, and we'll see how it goes from there. Because, again, college football is all matchup dependent.
Yep.
You know, home field advantage. If you can manage to get a home field playoff game in the first round, we'll see from there. But that's honestly how I kind of feel about the schedule this season.
Yeah, and you've got Texas at home, so I think that bodes very well for y'all against Texas.
At home, and people forget too, Michigan hasn't lost at home in like 3.5. We haven't lost at home since the COVID year. I know a lot of people will say, oh, Michigan Stadium's just a big hole in the ground of the sound escapes. But it is a home field advantage, and there's more to it than just the sound in the stadium. I don't know why I'm a psychology major, so I always get weird about people like claiming they know things about how people feel and stuff. It's like, it's not just the noise. You're also 1,000 miles away from home, playing in the cold in Michigan.
Yeah.
I don't know if those Texas boys I've worked with a lot of Texas guys myself in places like Minnesota. They had to layer up extra in the cold. Let me tell you, they didn't want to get out of the truck in the morning.
Well, and arguably too, like the other thing is, and this is something that even SEC fans, which is I'm one of them, like we forget is that especially like the Big House and the Shoe, y'all have probably two of the best college football or football environments that's out there, and it is like there are some SEC stadiums that can compete to some degree, but it is just a different type of competitive atmosphere that's in those places. And so it's one of those things that even if Texas shows up on their best day, they're still probably going to have some struggling. Mm-hmm. So it just, it's like the only reason I could see that not being a game where Texas or that not being a game where it's actually like competitive is if Michigan for some reason your entire first string is gone and you guys are having to play the water boy. Like it's just your fans are going to show up and it's going to make Texas uneasy. So
yeah, and again, that defense is built. I mean, Steve Sarkisian, I think, runs a really great offense. I like the offense that he runs. It seems like every other play they're calling some kind of crazy tunnel screen or some weird thing to get a wide receiver the ball within 2 seconds. But Michigan, again, with the speed they have, by the way, they got Jayshon Barham in the portal, but I'd be remorse if I didn't talk about on this podcast. Mm-hmm. He looked really great in the spring game. You got fast flying around linebackers and stuff. It's going to be tough. I will correct myself, though. I just realized that game is in September, so it could be 40 degrees out or it could be 90.
It's not Texas. Either way, it's not Texas.
Michigan weather is as unpredictable.
That's right.
Yeah. It's as unpredictable as a Mike Leach speech. You just
I'm a man.
Too true. Well, again, we appreciate you.
That was Mike Gundy.
Oh, that was Gundy.
Yeah, unpredictable.
Mike Leach was
the
Texas Tech guy.
Yeah,
wasn't he?
No, Leach was Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Well, edit that out.
No, no. We're too much in a flow right now.
That's right.
No.
Why would I do that?
I do got to ask one question though.
Yeah,
because we did this for Luke. What do you think the score would be for Michigan and Ohio State?
We did do this, yeah.
Before,
what do I think? The score would be?
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, give us a rough idea before.
I was to be fair, I was talking to the Ohio State guy last week, Chuck on Bucks, which I know that you're familiar with, Chuck.
Yeah, I actually watched it right before coming on the ears.
Okay, and we got going, and I did I started having some big fan feels going on, and I called a 2-touchdown victory, and now I'm kind of looking back and going, yeah, I think I might have been a little overzealous on that one, but you know what? It's out there. It's on there. So
can't take it back now.
I can't take it back. So.
Well, I've got a fun stat for you, actually, because I did some research for an upcoming, way too early Michigan versus Ohio State video I'm going to have coming out soon.
Awesome.
Do you know what the differential in rushing yards is over the past 3 seasons in that game?
Oh, gosh. I'm sure you guys are up by 300 or 400.
Yeah, Michigan has run for 705, I think it is.
Okay.
It's over 700 to Ohio State has run for 314.
Yeah.
So we have more than doubled up on rushing yards. And everyone knows in the game, something like 22 out of the last 23 winners have been the team that runs the ball.
Yeah.
So I'm not telling Ryan Day that. Don't tell Ryan Day that. I find him being in the dark on that.
Well, especially with Judkins and Henderson, we better run the ball.
Yeah. Well, Chip Kelly, too. People don't realize, people think Chip Kelly is this spread guy who loves to throw the ball a lot. His, core plays are, power and zone and stuff like that.
Big setup, man, just off the tackle.
Yeah. So, oh, man. Are they playing tomorrow is my question. Or is this if they play tomorrow, what's the score? Or is this we're guessing the game?
Yeah, no, you're guessing the game.
Yeah, you're guessing the game.
Okay. I do think... I know I'm going to let some Michigan fans down here. I do think that Ohio State wins this one. However, it is not going to be a 2-touchdown.
Yeah, I know.
I agree. Too good. They have the best corner in the country. They have Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham up front. So good luck running just base zone on them.
Oh, yeah.
You're not going to push them out of the way. Again, we've gone over the linebackers and all that. My problem is I don't see Michigan scoring that many points on that Ohio State defense because I think outside of linebacker, there are no question marks. And even at linebacker, you've got athletes there. So, yeah. I will say this, though, just to make things interesting and spicy, because I know maybe you guys are expecting me to be like, Michigan's going to blow them out by 3 touchdowns. It's going to be 2021 all over again.
It's your segment, man.
I can't do that. I have to be
For sure.
But I will say this: if it doesn't happen this year for Ohio State, what do you do? It feels like they've just poured everything into this year, and if you don't do it, like where do you go from? Because at some point if you're Ryan Day, you have to look at yourself and go, the problem is just me. I just can't do it. Like you've got your stepdaddy Chip Kelly coming back to coach with you. You've got every 100 rated 5-star player from the last 5 years on your roster. JTT hopefully will eventually play up to that. You've got all these guys. It reminds me. I'm outside of college football. I'm a huge nerd, by the way. So if you guys don't get this reference, it's okay. But there's an episode of Rick and Morty where they start out and Morty finds this like portal and he like hops to this other dimension and like steals this precious rock from this society, right? And then he goes back to get another thing and they've like built up like some defenses and he just like knocks them down anyway. And then he keeps coming back and they keep like building up all this stuff and eventually he comes back and they've got this like fortress around this thing and it doesn't matter anyway. He just like blows right through it. And I feel like that's been Ohio State these past 3 seasons at Michigan, where it's like, but now we've got Jim Knowles. Now we've got this guy. Now we've got Marvin Harrison. And it's like, doesn't matter. So, yeah, that's my thing. If this isn't the year for Ohio State, you've got the game at home too. Like we just went over, Columbus is a massive home field advantage. The sound actually stays in the stadium there for people that think that is the most important thing. So yeah, that's my whole take on the game, and it's good. It's good for the rivalry to be like this too.
It is.
It got honestly, especially for me, it got boring there, blown out in 2018 and 2019 and all that stuff. So
trust me, as a Tennessee fan, I understand.
Yeah,
having to deal with Alabama for 15 plus years. Yeah,
it's funny you mentioned that because I actually drove by Neyland Stadium a few months ago.
Oh, nice.
On our way to it, we did a family vacation in the Smokies, like your typical going to Pigeon Forge. As we drove over the Tennessee River right there by the stadium, I pointed to my wife and was like, "There's field goal posts in the river down there. Can we go look at them?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?"
There's actually multiple field goal posts down there. Really? Yeah, because we did it back when we beat Tennessee. When Tennessee beat Alabama, this back and we ended Alabama's streak back in the 70s. We pulled the field goal posts up and threw them in the river. It's actually technically a tradition.
So it is okay. Because I remember watching that live on TV and just thinking, that's awesome. That is the coolest thing. I wish there was a river right outside of Michigan Stadium. They wouldn't let us though. Michigan is too weighty.
That's the coolest thing that Tennessee's ever done.
Talking about, we had Peyton Manning. That's pretty cool.
And you guys still couldn't get the next man.
Hey, shh. It's okay. But yeah, anyways, well, again, we appreciate you coming on and talking some ball with us, talking some Michigan ball with us.
Yeah, appreciate you guys.
Yeah. Well, you want to give our listeners just a shout out to where they can find you?
Yeah, so I'm just on YouTube. It's the only thing I really stream on and stuff, so it's easy to find. YouTube.com/Darren Talks Ball. I'm also on Twitter or X or however you want to call it, depending on your opinion of Elon Musk. It's at Darren Talks Ball as well, so it's easy to find. And all we do is talk college football. All things Big Ten football, by the way. I didn't want to throw that in there. I'm a Michigan fan, so a lot of my content is Michigan-based, but if you go look at my most recent videos, I've talked Penn State, done a Washington preview for this next season. Ohio State, stuff like that. So, yeah, all things Big Ten football on Darren Talks Ball.
Awesome.
Sweet. Sweet. All righty. Well, my friend, we appreciate you. Hope you have a good rest of your night.
Yeah, you too.